Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War Frontline update for the 24th of August 2023. As you can see, I'm wearing my Country of Peace t-shirt today. It's Ukraine's National Day of Independence. Please check out the charity work Country of Peace do. I have interviewed Valeria, who runs a charity, so go and check that out. I think it's actually on my A Tippling Philosopher channel rather than my ATP Geopolitics channel. But yeah, go and check countryofpeace.com out and see the work they do. Anyway, now let's move on to the front line. I just want to point you towards a video I did yesterday. Is the counter-offensive failing? So go and check that out. That's one of my videos from yesterday that I think is hopefully it's worth watching. Gives you a quite a thorough analysis, as far as I'm concerned, as to what I think is taking place on the front line, just a general analysis, and whether the counteroffensive is failing or whether it's not. There's a lot of Western analysts or media outlets, a number of them, that are presenting a narrative that actually it's not going as well as Ukrainians would like, and it's kind of failing, and so on and so forth. And some US officials, military officials, are advising that they need to reallocate troops from the east to the south, and they haven't punched through enough with enough resources and force to break through the defensive lines, and they need to sacrifice more soldiers to do that, so on and so forth. I take all those claims, I look at them, I look at the other side of the story, and so on and so forth. I just want to reiterate my conclusion that actually I think it's going all right. And it's a case of adapting to the changing situation. In this case, like finding out that the defenses were really heavy all the way along the southern front line, that the minefields are very densely mined, and that there are a huge number of trenches, that when you put all these things together with the artillery and air defense systems and everything, you get a robust Russian defense. So they had to step back. They reassessed, and they are now going for the attrition of artillery while slowly prodding and probing in several places. But this is still this largely attritional phase where they are taking out huge amounts of artillery and equipment on a daily basis that will then lead to a much greater ability to strike through those defensive lines more effectively. Anyway, I think things are going okay for the Ukrainians, especially when you start looking at things taking place in, say, Crimea and some of the other strikes that they're having. And then you've seen the destruction of Wagner in Bakhmut. They retreated really to lick their wounds outside of Ukraine, and certainly further back in Ukraine as well. And then they had that mutiny, and now Prigozhin, Utkin, and Chekolov are dead. Then I don't think Wagner have a future, and I think they have effectively been wiped out. So that's 25,000 troops kind of taken out of the game. Certainly at the moment, you might find that some of those troops need a new home and find their way back into maybe Russian MOD, private military companies, and back onto the front line. I don't know, but you put all these things together, and I think the Ukrainians are in an all right position. They do need to continue recruiting. They are taking losses, and it is difficult to make those gains, but it's all about attrition of equipment at the moment. And when you start looking at some of the Russian sources, there's not too much in today's Frontline update you won't have heard on my segment in my news piece this morning. People like the 13th here saying, remember I talked about dates, about the fact that they have Independence Day on the 24th, so that's today, about what will happen, something bad, and so it happened. The front is crumbling. I just don't tell you about it. I don't want to believe in this damnation myself. I'm still looking for some justification for this. Do not be discouraged. The main thing is that now you are not afraid to die. Wow. So that's really gloomy. It's a doom post. And again, we have Romanov here, the Russian ultra-nationalist mill blogger, saying what kind of expletive is happening right now in the Kherson direction. Interaction, reaction speed, all completely absent. The enemy launches boats along Dnipro, is making rotations, lands deep reconnaissance groups. There are simply no words. The idea that there is just there's no counter battery fire. We keep hearing complaints about that there are intercepts saying that they're running out of tanks. I think things are looking bad for the Russians at the moment. Just a quick update as to what is going on front line is according to Kenneth Gregg, the Finnish fighter in Ukraine, saying down in Kherson, the Russians have moved a motorized regiment to Kozachi-Lahiri to prevent future advance in the area. They've also moved another separate motorized rifle brigade to counter the growing bridgehead at Pidestepna. So this is, I'm going to sort of forward wind to Kherson. This is Kozachi-Lahiri, the bridgehead that could well still be there. We haven't heard about it from Ukrainian sources, but it appears that the Russians are still talking about it. And the idea, Kenneth Gregg here is saying that there's a growing bridgehead towards Pidestepny there, potentially. One starts getting really worried about what is coming, from a Russian point of view. The Robotyne front is very interesting. We took a deep, wide bite in the area. Russians moved in some reserves to support the flank in the Novo-Fedorivka area, and they are moving units from fortified hubs. Undoubtedly, they're short on units now, and so on and so forth. So things are, I think, if what I think is correct, then the Russians have a lack of depth in reserves. They are moving what few reserves they have really from near the front line to the front line. It's not like they're taking reserves from Melitopol, from Mariupol, from Berdyansk, from bases far behind the front line. Their reserves are pretty much there. They're just moving them from one place to another in a kind of like where's the P in a P in the cup game, or whack-a-mole, or whatever, however you want to see it. And I think they are in a little bit of trouble, let's say. Right, okay, if we go up to the north, we're going to go to the Kupiansk area. Sorry, I can't help pressing buttons on a mouse. My fingers don't do what I tell them to. The delights of a neurological disease, eh? Right, so that we can get rid of all that and move on to looking for the first time in a few days, actually, at the Institute for the Study of War, American military think tank. A lot of preamble they talk about. There's so much going on in Ukraine at the moment, but interestingly, not a crazy amount going on along the front lines. They talk about activity up in the north in the Kupiansk area, then all the way down in Crimea area and everywhere in between. Repelled attacks, all around here, all the way up and down the front line, Novoselivska down to Crimea, Torska area, so on and so forth. But not too much really to report. Getty says that the operational situation in the Kupiansk direction to the northwest, north, and northeast of the village of Sinkivka. So Sinkivka is this small town just northeast of Kupiansk. So there's Kupiansk, which is a bit of a logistical hub locally there. Sinkivka is here, and it is looking, as according to Syriac maps, indeed, I haven't shown you the map legend at the moment. If you want to know what all my lines mean, the different colors, please pause the video now and check out the key to the map. But anyway, if you sorry, back to my map. If you look at the red lines here of Syriac maps, the pro-Russian map is saying the Russian lines are looking like they're surrounding defensive lines surrounding Sinkivka. Sinkivka is very much a grey zone. I don't know if that is very definitely true, but it's certainly, I think, under pressure. To the northwest, north, and northeast of the village of Sinkivka, positional battles continued. The Russian commander withdrew part of the troops and offensive equipment from Tavozhanka, he says here, to Valuski region in the Belgorod Oblast, which is not something I've heard elsewhere. But the claim is Tavozhanka, which is this town there to the east of Dorichne, their, I presume, reserves have been withdrawn to Belgorod. Whether that's because there are some threats in Belgorod from activity from maybe deep reconnaissance groups, maybe the Russian volunteer groups or whatnot, I don't know. That's just me speculating. If that is indeed true, so it might not be that Russians have withdrawn those troops at all. I mean, I've only just seen that in one source, and the provenance of that is arguably questionable. So yeah, here the ISW, the only thing I think that's worthy of particular note is a Russian mill blogger claiming that unspecified Russian volunteer battalions are conducting assaults near Bilahorivka and are semi-encircling Ukrainian forces in the settlement. ISW adds that they've seen no observed evidence of this happening at all, but the Russians are claiming that around Bilahorivka here, the Ukrainians are semi-encircled by Russian volunteer battalions. So things are fairly difficult around Bilahorivka. There's been quite a lot of fighting there, well, for a very long time. But no huge amounts of detail coming out concerning territorial exchanges, and the same goes for Bakhmut. I talked in that analysis of the front line that I think the Ukrainians might have taken on board some of the criticisms from some of these US officials and moved at least some of their offensive forces from the Bakhmut area down to the southern front line. And that could be why Bakhmut has gone somewhat quiet. We are still seeing the Ukrainians attempt to take Russian positions to or either at the railway line or to the east of the railway line, going sort of north to south from Bakhmut down to Ozaryanivka here, past Klishchivka, Andriivka, and Kurdyumivka. Still fierce fighting there. I don't know that a huge amount of huge amount of gain has been made by either side. No report said yesterday the Ukrainian military is advancing south of the city of Bakhmut, as a spokesperson of the General Staff has said. In that area, they're entrenched at the achieved boundaries, which pretty much says that nothing's really changed, even though they say they are advancing. I don't know that is they did advance yesterday. They're just generally advancing in this area, and they are entrenching at their achieved position. So, in other words, they either advance marginally or they're just consolidating. There are claims from Andrew Perpetua and his mapping, signified by the blue line on my map, that Ukrainians have made gains within the grey zone in Klishchivka. So he indicates that this part of Klishchivka is solidly under Ukrainian control. And he would have been looking at satellite imagery and other visual confirmation to conclude that. So there are kind of gains, but you might not see it reflected in my map, either Suriyat maps or Andrew Perpetua's maps there. Deep State in yellow, no change there at all for anywhere for them that I signify, such as Avdiivka and Bakhmut. And if we go down to Avdiivka, south of Bakhmut, no change there. I mean, just in the ISW, both Bakhmut and Avdiivka, indications that there are no advances, did not advance, Russians and Ukrainians, and did not advance for Avdiivka as well. So really not much to report, although there is still activity taking place, obviously around Avdiivka and in and around Mariinka too, and even I think Novomykhailivka area as well has some activity, but nothing really to report on. And then we come down to Donetsk, southern Donetsk, before we get to Zaporizhia Oblast and the Velika Novosilka salient, and actually not much to report from there either. It really is fairly quiet along a number of these axes where previously we've seen an awful lot of activity. Okay, what does the ISW say about this area? The Russian Vostok Battalion, which is operating in the area, claims that Ukrainian forces attempted to find a gap in Russian defensive lines near Novodonetsk, which is to say you've got here, if we zoom in, the Ukrainians took Staromyrsky, then they took Urozhainy. We haven't heard anything since then about any activity going down into Zavitna Bazhanya. I'm sure that they are pressuring there. It could just be operational security, of course, and then trying to find a gap around Novodonetsk. We heard that they were fighting towards Kremenchuk and were trying to interdict the road that connects Novodonetsk and Kremenchuk, but just really haven't heard anything since then. Now, I've got this as gains, possible gains here from the Russians and Ukrainians. I hadn't quite updated accurately the last couple of days what had gone on here, as according to Andrew Perpetua, and there was just, I think it's more of a rejigging for both sides. So again for the Ukrainians technically there, and again for the Russians here. So it's just a bit of weird. I think it's just rejigging of the map as well, just from what Andrew Perpetua has indicated. But anyway, just to let you know, there is. It might look different from yesterday, but yeah, not too much information there. We have heard that this area to the northeast of Priyatne, the Ukrainians are chipping away at each side of that area that the Russians are holding on to. I wouldn't really call it a salient or a bridgehead. They're not attacking. They're trying to hold on to that and defend it by the fact that it has higher. It is higher ground, and you've got mines laid along this ravine there. So they are able to effectively defend it, or have been, but the Russians are now under pressure because the Ukrainians are moving in from both the west and the east now, along the kind of the same height ground. So you can tell the height difference using this Google Maps here. That's 167 meters, and then it goes to 150. So it goes a little bit downhill as you get to the ravine there, but then drops 149 meters and then goes back up. So it drops here and then goes back onto this high ground, 165 meters, and if they can get in from the side here, which is 168 meters, then that it allows them to be on the same sort of on a level playing field, if you like. So that's why you're seeing the Russians have the Ukrainians having more success at the sides there. Right, moving on to the west, we come past Drozhyanka, that we were hearing some rumors about, have heard nothing about it since then, and we come on to Robotyne. So this is the area of most of the success for the Ukrainians at the moment. We saw yesterday that they were raising the flag on buildings in Robotyne. We had Ukrainian civilians being evacuated from sheltering in the town still, even considering it's been absolutely hammered by all sorts of ordnance. We now have the gains showed by both Andrew Perpetua and Suryat Maps here in the area. I don't know, something weird going on with my mapping there. Give me a second. Sorry about that. I have my mapping correct now. So as you can see, both mappers here indicate that there are some gains for the Ukrainians in the Robotyne area, some quite significant gains. Even Suryat Maps has the Russians pushed out of, or their defensive line to the south now of Robotyne, and Andrew Perpetua has the Russians pushed even further back towards Novopokrovka. Okay, there are some claims, like the ISW is still referring to some of the Russian sources that claim that the Ukrainians have been pushed back in Robotyne, which I don't think are at all true. So ISW says geolocated footage published on the 22nd, so bear in mind it's 2 days ago, shows that Ukrainian forces advanced southeast of Robotyne. Geolocated footage published on the 23rd, so that is yesterday, by Ukrainian sources, including Soluzhny, show that Ukrainian forces erected a flag in southern Robotyne, indicating that Russian forces likely have limited remaining positions in the village. The Ukrainian General Staff reported unspecified Ukrainian successes in the direction of Novodanilivka. So that is Novodanilivka is over there. So I don't quite know what that means. So that, as I say, is unspecified general direction. And Novopokrovka, and I've reported on that. So in fact, those general claims about Novopokrovka, yeah, they're in what I spoke about earlier today. I don't have the claims there. It was one I had in my news piece, but it is kind of general success, success in Novopokrovka direction. I mean, we've seen a JDAM bomb hit a building in Novopokrovka and cause substantial damage there. We've seen the first person view drones active around there. So I think the Ukrainians are successfully in control of Robotyne, and they are now focusing on Novopokrovka. However, as the ISW then goes on to say, Russian mill bloggers largely claim that fighting is ongoing for control of Robotyne, and that Russian forces repelled Ukrainian attacks in and near the settlement. Some mill bloggers claim that Russian forces push Ukrainian forces from central to northern Robotyne, and that Russian forces maintain control over southern Robotyne. I just don't think that's true. Full stop. Ukrainian sources are saying that Ukraine has liberated Robotyne, 4.1 square kilometers added to the liberated status. Even Suryat Map's pro-Russian mapper is saying that the Russians are pushed back from Robotyne, and they say recent video footage shows Ukrainian flag placed on the roof of the town council of Robotyne, which was retaken today by the 47th Mechanized Brigade. The battle has been one of the longest and toughest battles of the Ukrainian counteroffensive, which lasted 71 days. During that period of time, Russian troops have shown an incredible defensive capacity despite the numerical inferiority on this axis, as it was foreseeable that the population would be taken back by the Ukrainians relatively easily. However, once Ukrainian forces entered the town, it was only a matter of days before the Russians eventually withdrew. Indeed, the arrival of new reinforcements from the 7th Airborne Division allowed some positions to be regained by replacing the exhausted Russian troops, but the aim was only to allow a comfortable retreat to the southern defences and the town of Novopokrovivka, where further fighting was to take place. Consequently, the southern part of the locality remains a grey area subject to shelling, but one thing is certain: there is no more Russian soldiers in the locality. So that goes against what other Russian sources are saying. The recapture of Robotyne is a morale boost for Ukrainian troops, who will most likely take advantage of it to try to breach the ever closer first line of the main Russian defence, which will happen in the third phase of the counteroffensive that is beginning, and in which a larger number of troops will be involved. A significant victory is necessary if the Ukrainian army is to continue to receive foreign aid. So this is playing into what the sources like the New York Times are saying, that clock is ticking. If they want to keep getting if they want to keep getting Western aid, then they need to succeed. And they need to succeed soon. I think that is not quite correct. Suryat Maps continues. However, the Russian army has been preparing its defences since the end of last year and has already demonstrated that Russian troops will put up stubborn resistance to every square kilometre in contention. Okay, so that is a situation as according to Suryat Maps there. Let's find you the JDAM footage. So here it is. This is a building in Novopokrovivka there that gets the JDAM treatment, and that's supposedly an army HQ there. I wonder if we can geolocate that. Yep, so that is very much in the center. So if you see, that's an L-shaped building with that square with the black line going across it. That is right in the middle here of the town. So that's that building there. That has been taken out by JDAM. That's supposedly the headquarters. And you think with that kind of battering, you wonder how long the Russians can hold on to that. They would have been pretty exhausted by the activities in Robotyne, but then you could say the same for the Ukrainians. But do the Ukrainians have a better ability to rotate their forces? So this is a bit of geolocation. So we have, what do we have here? FPV drones hitting Ukrainian infantry. So we know the Ukrainians are, for example, here. Oh, well, no, that's certainly not. Then that's not Tokmak. I don't know. I don't know whether that's a mistake there. Geo confirm. Let's try that one again. Let's see if I got that correct. Oh no, that was me pressing V and not Control V. So here it is. It's Ukrainian forces being hit by Russians there. So that's where you would expect them. Let's do a couple more. Here we have another FPV drone strike on Ukrainians. We'll see where this one is. So the Ukrainians are, same place, just next door. And here we have FPV drone of the Special Forces of the Russian Federation, and this is near Verbove. So Ukrainian forces here. I imagine it's going to be the same sort of one. It's probably ISW using lots of different geolocations of the same activity. Oh no, so that is pretty interesting. Right, so that is right on Russian lines, and that is northwest of Verbove. So let's go and look at that one again. This is an FPV drone and the Special Forces of Russian Federation attacking Ukrainian position to the northwest of Robotyne. That would indicate I think, quite a significant gain of territory for the Ukrainians as they're pushing towards Verbove there. But again, as with always with these claims and geolocations, you don't know whether the Ukrainians are still there, whether it's hitting the positions and that forces the Ukrainians to leave or whatnot. So anyway, the last one is 82nd Air Assault captured Russian positions using strikers west of Verbove. They took prisoners of war and a vehicle possibly damaged, likely a couple of days old. So let's see where this ends up being. And yeah, so that would make sense. A couple of days previously, taking positions there and moving on to positions further to the east. So those are the geolocations that were included in the ISW footnotes there. It looks like the Ukrainians are having most of their success around here, and you just wonder how long it will be before, Novopokrovka is next, or do they kind of halt there, try and take Verbove and Kopani? But you've got to remember there are so many seriously, um, you know, intricate trench lines around here, or quite robust trench lines, particularly to the south around Ocheretovate here, and yeah, it is going to be difficult for the Ukrainians to make those advances. The question is, as I've said many times, are those trench lines manned with enough Russian troops? So the densest areas of minefields are up here. As they go further to the south, the minefields will be less problematic because the Russians won't have laid so many mines here, because they will be active themselves in these areas and they don't want to blow themselves up. So it's a case of, retreat and mine as you do it. But do they have enough mines? The logistics have been absolutely hammered. Do they have the mine throwing vehicles as well, as some of those have been taken out? So are they able to cause the challenge to the Ukrainians of minefields that they have previously been experiencing? I don't know, and I'd hope that you might see Ukrainians advance more quickly. Okay, as we come to Kherson, not a great deal of news coming out of there, other than some claims that the Russians are still dealing with Ukrainians in that area. If we go back to what Kenneth Gregg was saying, it appears that there is still a growing bridgehead, at least according to him, in the Kazachi Lahiri area on the way to Pidestepne. So it's down here. So we heard some time ago that the bridgehead that Ukrainians had gained on the other side of Dnipro was allowing them to attack in two directions towards Kazachi Lahiri and down to Pidestepne. And then it kind of went silent. Russians claim that they pushed the Ukrainians out, but certain sources like Kenneth Gregg there saying that that's still a problem. And then you have other Russian sources, like I read to you earlier, saying that the Ukrainians are just not being hit with counter battery fire. They are interacting. We are unable to react. The Kherson area is just a big problem for the Russians. So it's just a real mixed bag of nuts in terms of what the sources are saying about that Dnipro area. If we go to the ISW, they say Russian mill bloggers claim that Ukrainian forces continue efforts to cross the Dnipro in Kherson. One mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces continue attempts to gain a foothold near Oleshki, but that Russian, the 81st separate Spetsnaz, so Special Forces Brigade, likely volunteer formation that is subordinate to the Dnipro group of forces that has recently recruited and received aid from occupied Crimea, are defending in the area. Another mill blogger complained that Russian forces do not react quickly enough, and that's kind of what I was saying, probably the same source, to Ukrainian personnel transports across the river. So they are complaining that Ukrainians can get their forces across the river with some kind of impunity, and the Russians are just unable to do anything about it. It's just like, I have no words, he said. It's just is looking bad. So Oleshki is further down here to the southwest near the Antonivsky Bridge. And that's the first time we've heard that mentioned for a few days. Andrew Perpetua changed his mapping to indicate that the Russians have been pushed back along this bridge area, but we don't get too much granular detail coming out from there. Right, the last thing to talk about, and I'd spent a good deal of time talking about this in my news piece earlier today, is the activity in Crimea, in and around Crimea. So very quickly, yesterday, S-400 was taken out here. The day before, we had 2 drones coming down from Ukrainian territory, doglegging and moving towards Crimea and then being taken out. And I was saying that if you're going to use only 2 drones, then the likelihood is you're using them to find out, as sacrificial drones to find out where air defense systems are, and then you hit the air defense systems. Well, that's exactly what happened. So they sent those drones, found out where the air defense systems were, and then hammered the S-400 air defense system, possibly from boats out here. So then there was footage coming out yesterday of an oil rig somewhere around here with boats circling it, and supposedly a Su-30 Russian jet went to take out the boats and was hit by a manpad. They claim they took out a boat. Ukrainians claim they didn't take out a boat. Whatever, we don't know. But that airframe limped back to the airbase, hit by manpads, and these guys might have had Harpoon missiles on board their boats and took out the S-400 from there, or it was taken out from the mainland. But either way, they lost arguably an S-400 battery, is what the maximalist claims of the Ukrainians are. If not, they lost a number of components of the battery in this area near Olenivka here. But not only that, apparently if we go to Humenyuk here saying that the S-400 anti-aircraft missile complex was destroyed, and 3 more S-300 launchers were destroyed or damaged in Kherson. That's really significant. So that means that the Russian air defense is weakened not only in Kherson but in Crimea, and you are going to start seeing the ramifications of that. So the Ukrainians will be doing things based on the weakness of the Russian air defense. So will you see drones and missiles hit Crimea? Almost certainly. What will you see taking place in the Kherson region as well? Now, subsequent to all of that activity, we then saw this morning a special forces attack on this peninsula. Now, if we go to the sources, I've talked about this in greater depth, but Ukrainian Special Forces today landed in Crimea as part of the operation at Cape Tarkan-Kut. That was confirmed by the Ukrainians. Same place, same cape where the S-400 was destroyed. The Russians admitted that 10 saboteurs landed and opened fire. And the various claims that there were no losses for the Ukrainians. Unsure as to exactly what they were trying to do. Here, this source talks about how the goal was achieved for those special forces. Explosions were heard near the village of Mayak on Cape Tarkan-Kut. So if we go back to my map here, Mayak, I'm not 100% sure where that is. But we've got Olen. Oh yeah, so it is right next to Olenivka, which is nearby. This is where the S-400 was taken out. So this is where the special forces landed, and then it goes on to say that Ukrainian intelligence confirmed a battle involving boats and aircraft in the area. I don't know if that was what took place the day before, but this is the important stuff for me. Mayak is home to the base of the 3rd Radio Regiment of the Russian Aerospace Forces Radio Engineering Troops. Also, the Tarkan-Kut Peninsula is a radar node. The Nebo-M radar and the Castor 2E2 radar air defense positions have been prepared along the perimeter. So, best case scenario, Ukrainians took out some radar installations. However, I don't know if they did actually take out anything. I mean, Budanov said we now have the ability to hit any part of the temporarily occupied Crimea as of now. We can reach the enemy at absolutely any point. Those who have done stupid things, it's better for them to leave. And then he asked for people to, help with reconnaissance in the area. We had Crimean Tatar homes being raided by the Russians. And then this footage has come out. So GUR units dodge airstrikes of the Russians after completing the task in Crimea. There is gunfire as well from this. I think it's so. This is a long bit of footage, but you hear, guns being shot. They're firing up in the air, so. That's possibly referring back to the activity between boats and aircraft that you heard about in that earlier source. So there are lots of activity after landing. The question is, what did they do when they landed? There's now footage coming out of the special operation, some night footage, the GUR in occupied Crimea, joint special operation GUR of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine took place with the support of the Navy. On the 24th night, an operation took place where they landed on the shore of the area of Olenivka and Mayak settlements. During the execution of the task, the Ukrainian defenders engaged in combat with the units of the occupier. As a result, the enemy suffered losses among personnel. Enemy equipment was destroyed. It's quite vague. And then you see this flag being erected as well. Somewhere on a building there. It's just kind of symbolic gesture. The question is, was this all they were doing? Would they go to all that length just to lay a flag? I doubt it. Will they have destroyed important equipment there? Don't know. And then there's footage of them retreating from the Crimean mission. So it appears to be a successful mission. Exactly what they achieved is, as of yet, a little unknown. Here, Status 6 says just outside Olenivka and Mayak, where the Ukrainian Special Forces reportedly landed early this morning. There's a battalion of the 3rd Radio Technical Regiment. Multiple radar installations are located there. It's currently unknown whether the facility was a target for the raid, but the proximity to the landing zone leads to that speculation. I'd love to know what they succeed in doing, if anything, there, and that will be really important in terms of allowing the Ukrainians to do further activities over Crimea or possibly onto Crimea. We had the claim from Budanov that the Ukrainians would be on Crimea by the end of the summer, and that actually fulfills that prediction. Obviously not in a kind of major army advancing from the north kind of way. I wonder whether Sevastopol will now be more vulnerable to aerial attacks, given that these air defense systems and radars would be protecting the airspace into Sevastopol. So yeah, that's all from the Frontline update. As I think it's worth belaboring the point about the air defense here around Crimea and the activities of their special forces, because I think that is super, super important. Anyway, thank you so much for your support. Please take care. And just a few bits of housekeeping as well. I may well be getting a Discord server sorted out with the help of someone else. I don't really know what that does. I'm not a member of a Discord chat group for philosophy, but I haven't really used it for some time. Hopefully it'll be useful for you guys to hang out and chat and whatnot. So that is happening. If that is something that you are up for, hopefully I'll get that sorted fairly soon with the very generous help of someone else, and I'll big them up soon. Anyway, take care. Speak soon.